Ladies and gentlemen, let me start with something that will grab your attention right away. Sometimes, the most powerful messages are not shouted from podiums or declared in press conferences. They're hidden, woven into gestures, words, or even silence. And right now, the United States is trembling because a message carefully concealed has been directed toward India. A message not meant for the world's headlines, but one that slipped through cracks, causing shockwaves in Washington. What was this hidden message from Trump? Was it a signal of partnership, a hint of rivalry, or perhaps an admission that America needs India more than India needs America? The truth is, hidden messages are never accidents. They are deliberate. They're calculated. And this one has sent American policymakers into a frenzy. Because let's be honest, India is no longer the quiet, rising power that others can ignore. India today is shaping the future of technology, security, and global trade. For decades, Washington has enjoyed the upper hand in setting the global agenda. But Trump's message, intentional or not, acknowledged something the establishment fears: the balance of power is shifting eastward. India is no longer just a partner, it is a force. Now imagine the U.S. elite reading between the lines of Trump's words, realizing that India is being positioned not as a side player, but as a central pillar of the New World Order. That kind of revelation shakes the corridors of Washington, because if India is treated as equal, if India is recognized as indispensable, then the monopoly of influence that America once enjoyed is broken. And here's the beauty of it: the message was hidden, but the impact is out in the open. Military strategists are recalculating. Trade negotiators are revising their playbooks. Analysts are whispering about a future where New Delhi calls the shots in Asia, while Washington scrambles to keep pace. This is the moment where history bends, because America, for all its strength, cannot dictate terms the way it once did. And Trump's subtle acknowledgement, hidden yet explosive, was like a spark on dry grass. It spread fast. It revealed something that could not be undone: that India's rise is real, undeniable, and unstoppable. So, as shockwaves ripple across the United States, one truth emerges clearly. This hidden message wasn't just about diplomacy, it was about destiny. And destiny is now pointing toward India. Would you like me to extend this into a full 18-minute motivational speech, around to 500 to 3,000 words, in this same style, with pacing, rhythm, and storytelling layered in? Trump's hidden message signals a shifting balance of power toward India, and that revelation is enough to unsettle the deepest foundations of Washington's confidence. For decades, the United States has carried itself as the unquestioned leader of the global stage, dictating terms, setting alliances, and steering the course of international politics. But in this message, subtle, almost disguised, there was an acknowledgement that India is no longer on the periphery. Instead, India is stepping directly into the spotlight, and the balance of power that once leaned heavily toward the West is beginning to tilt in a new direction. What makes this so significant is that hidden messages are rarely accidents. They are crafted to send signals to those who can read between the lines. In this case, the message was clear: America sees India not just as a partner of convenience, but as a power it must now respect, recognize, and perhaps even depend upon. That realization alone shifts the psychological landscape in Washington. The country that was once the unquestioned architect of global order is now quietly adjusting to the fact that it must share influence with a nation whose rise it cannot control. For years, India's growth was often measured in terms of potential. Potential markets, potential military strength, potential global role. But now it is no longer about potential. It is about reality. India has become a technological powerhouse, a hub of innovation, and a nation capable of shaping global conversations in ways that once only Western powers could. When a leader like Trump drops a hidden acknowledgement of this, it signals to the entire American establishment that the time has come to rethink their assumptions. The world order is no longer West-centered. It is tilting, and India is the reason why. The balance of power is not just about economics or military might. It is about perception and influence. When Trump's words, however subtle, suggested that India must be factored in as an equal, it struck a nerve in Washington. The unspoken truth is that the United States fears losing its monopoly on influence, and every signal that confirms India's rise feels like a warning bell. The message becomes less about what was said and more about what it represents: the dawn of an era where America cannot act as the sole global commander. And make no mistake, the world is paying attention. Nations in Asia, Europe, and even Africa are watching how America positions itself with India. The message hinted at a reluctant recognition, a realization that at the old balance no longer holds. Countries that once leaned heavily on the United States are now exploring their ties with India more seriously, sensing that a new polar power is emerging. The shift is not just geopolitical, it is cultural, economic, and strategic. The United States is discovering that the ground beneath its feet is moving, and India is the reason the earth is shaking. This shift creates both opportunities and fears. On one hand, India's rise offers a chance for cooperation, for shared progress, and for a multipolar balance that could stabilize global politics. On the other hand, it threatens the entrenched mindset in Washington that America must always lead, must always dominate, and must always decide the course of world events. Trump's hidden message pierced that mindset, however, unintentionally, and revealed a truth that the establishment would rather keep buried. The age of unilateral dominance is ending. The shockwaves in America are not just about what Trump said, but about what it implies. If the balance of power is tilting toward India, then the United States must rethink its strategies, its alliances, and its very sense of identity as a global leader. That is not an easy adjustment. Power, once lost, is rarely regained, and the more the world acknowledges India's strength, the more America realizes it cannot ignore the new reality. Trump's message, hidden yet powerful, was not simply a diplomatic gesture. It was a signpost pointing toward the future, and that future carries the unmistakable imprint of India's rise. Do you want me to move ahead and expand Kana No. 2 in the same 600-word powerful style? Washington fears India's rise as a central pillar in the global order because it challenges the very framework that has long defined American dominance. For decades, the United States has operated from a position of control, constructing alliances and institutions that reinforced its authority. India was often seen as an emerging nation, one to be courted occasionally, but not one that could fundamentally alter the international balance. That perception has now been shattered. India's rise has been too visible, too impactful, and too undeniable to dismiss. And when Washington looks at India today, it sees not just a growing power, but a central force that can reshape the global architecture in ways the United States cannot dictate. Fear comes from the recognition that the old order is slipping away. America has always thrived on being the hub around which others revolve. Nations allied with it, depended on it, and took direction from it. But India, with its booming economy, expanding military capabilities, and increasing influence in global politics, represents an alternative center of gravity. Washington fears that if India continues this trajectory, countries that once leaned on the U.S. for leadership might instead pivot toward New Delhi, weakening America's grip on the global stage. That fear is not paranoia, it is rooted in reality. What makes India's rise especially daunting for Washington is that it is not based on one dimension alone. This is not just about economics or just about military power or just about soft influence. It is all of these combined. India is becoming a technological giant, home to some of the world's fastest growing innovations. It has become an indispensable market for global trade, attracting investments and shaping economic trends. At the same time, its military capabilities are being modernized. Its space program is making headlines, and its diplomatic voice is being heard in forums where it once went unnoticed. When a nation starts commanding attention in multiple arenas, it no longer plays a supporting role. It becomes a pillar. That is what unsettles Washington. Another layer of this fear lies in India's independence. Unlike many nations that align closely with American policy, India does not bend easily. It maintains relationships with powers that Washington considers rivals, such as Russia, while still engaging strongly with the West. This refusal to be boxed into a single camp makes India unpredictable and independent, qualities that the U.S. establishment struggles to control. A country that cannot be dictated to, yet commands growing influence, is the kind of power that can alter the balance of global decision-making. Washington knows this, and it breeds a quiet anxiety. Fear also grows from the symbolism of India's rise. For decades, the narrative of global power revolved around the United States and increasingly China. India was often left in the shadows of these two giants. But now, India is stepping into its own light, and the narrative is changing. A tripolar world where India stands as a central pillar alongside the U.S., and China threatens to dilute America's dominance. It no longer becomes the unquestioned leader, but one of several leaders. To a nation built on the belief of exceptionalism, that is not just a strategic concern, it is an existential one. The ripples of this fear can be seen in Washington's hurried recalibrations. Military alliances are being reconsidered, economic ties with India are being strengthened, and diplomatic overtures are becoming more frequent. Yet behind every handshake and promise lies the uneasy realization that these moves are not about generosity but necessity. America is compelled to acknowledge India's rise not because it wants to, but because it has no choice. The fear stems from the understanding that ignoring India is no longer possible, and that engaging with it comes with the risk of ceding influence. Washington's unease ultimately reflects a deeper truth. The global order is no longer America's to design alone. India's rise as a central pillar means the foundations of power are being rebuilt with new architects. The United States, long accustomed to holding the blueprint, you must now share the table. And for a superpower that has defined itself by dominance, that shift is unsettling. The fear in Washington is not just about India's growing role, it is about America's diminishing ability to contain it. India is not merely rising, it is anchoring the future. And that future forces Washington to confront the possibility that it will no longer be the singular force shaping the destiny of the world. Do you want me to continue with Keynote Note 3 in the same expanded 600-word style? The U.S. elite see India as no longer a side player, but an indispensable force. And this realization carries weight far beyond diplomacy. For decades, American policymakers and strategists treated India as a regional power. Important in South Asia, useful in balancing Pakistan, and occasionally valuable in broader trade or security matters. But the global elite in Washington now understand that those old categories no longer apply. India has stepped out of the regional box and entered the world stage as a nation whose decisions influence global markets, global security, and global politics. The shift from side player to indispensable force is not just a matter of language, it reflects a fundamental change in how power is distributed in the 21st century. When a country becomes indispensable, it means the world cannot function smoothly without it. This is the new position India finds itself in. From energy markets to technology supply chains, from climate discussions to defense partnerships, India's role has become central. No major global issue can be resolved without India's input or cooperation. For Washington's elite, this is a sobering recognition. They are accustomed to setting agendas and expecting others to follow. Now, they find themselves in a position where they must consult with New Delhi, listen carefully to its interests, and often adapt to its demands. That kind of role reversal does not come easily to those who have spent decades believing that leadership naturally flows from the United States. India's indispensability is reinforced by its demographic and economic strength. With a population surpassing 1.4 billion and a youthful workforce, India holds the key to the future of global consumption and production. Multinational corporations know that India is not just a market of today, but the market of tomorrow. American business leaders, lobbyists, and policymakers see this and realize that ignoring India is not only foolish, but impossible. The U.S. elite, who once considered India secondary, now regard it as essential for sustaining their own economic future. The dependence is mutual, but the recognition of India's leverage is what creates the real shift in perception. Military and strategic considerations deepen this indispensability. India sits in a geographic location that is vital to global trade routes and regional stability. Its growing defense partnerships, modernization programs, and capability to project power in the Indo-Pacific make it a cornerstone in any attempt to maintain balance in Asia. The U.S. elite, especially within defense circles, know that without India's active participation, American strategies in the Indo-Pacific are incomplete, if not ineffective. This understanding has elevated India from a country of interest to a partner without which Washington cannot pursue its long-term goals. Culturally and politically, India's rise adds another layer to this indispensability. As the world's largest democracy, India carries moral and ideological weight. Its ability to stand independently while navigating relationships with multiple powers, including Russia and China, shows resilience and autonomy that impresses global observers. To the U.S. elite, this independence is both valuable and concerning. It makes India reliable in the sense of stability, but unpredictable in terms of alignment. That unpredictability forces Washington to treat India with more respect and care, further cementing its indispensable status. What makes this recognition most powerful is that it has reached beyond analysts and academics into the core of American power structures. The financial elite, corporate leaders, military strategists, and political decision makers all see India as unavoidable in their calculations. This unanimity across sectors signals that India's position is not temporary or circumstantial. It is structural and permanent. A nation that was once considered optional is now essential, and this transformation reflects a deeper truth about the global balance of power. For the United States, acknowledging India as indispensable means rethinking the very way it engages with the world. It can no longer dictate terms or assume compliance. It must negotiate, collaborate, and often compromise. That shift in posture represents a humbling moment for a superpower that has rarely been forced into such positions. For India, however, it marks the arrival at a place it has long deserved, recognized not as a supporting actor, but as a leading force shaping the future of the global order. Would you like me to expand Keynote Note 4 next in the same 600-word style? Hidden acknowledgments often carry more weight than public declarations because they reveal truths that leaders are not yet ready to say out loud. When something is spoken openly, it can be dismissed as political rhetoric, exaggerated for the cameras or tailored for a specific audience. But when a message is tucked away in a subtle gesture, a choice of words, or even in silence, it feels more authentic, more deliberate, and often far more unsettling. Washington understands this well. which is why Trump's hidden message about India has caused more ripples than any official statement could. It was not shouted from a podium, but whispered through implication, and that whisper carried the weight of a thunderclap. The psychology of politics makes hidden acknowledgments powerful. When something is not meant to be heard by everyone, those who do catch it immediately assign greater significance to it. It feels like an unguarded truth, a glimpse into the real thinking of a leader or a government. In the case of India, the hidden acknowledgement from Trump suggested that the U.S. sees India not just as an ally, but as a force it cannot control or ignore. Publicly, America may praise India as a partner, but hidden words that hint at dependence or recognition of power strike much deeper. They confirm what analysts and observers have suspected, that India's rise is altering the hierarchy of global power in ways America cannot easily manage. What makes hidden acknowledgments especially impactful is that they bypass the filters of diplomacy. Official declarations are often filled with carefully chosen words designed to avoid offense or controversy. But when a leader's unfiltered thought slips through, it rings with authenticity. Washington's elite know this, which is why they reacted so strongly to Trump's concealed signal. It was not just about what he said, but about what he truly meant, and meaning carries far more power than mere words. A hidden message strips away performance and leaves behind reality. History shows that some of the most pivotal shifts in international relations began with hidden acknowledgments rather than formal statements. A gesture during a private meeting, a leaked memo, or an offhand remark often does more to change perceptions than any official policy announcement. That is because hidden acknowledgments feel irreversible. They suggest a deeper recognition that cannot easily be walked back. In this case, Trump's subtle message toward India was enough to spark debates in Washington because it suggested that America's leadership privately admits what it publicly resists, that India is no longer a secondary player, but a central force. For India, this kind of acknowledgement is more powerful than any treaty or agreement. It is proof that beneath the polished exterior of diplomacy, the United States knows India's influence is real. And for Washington, that reality is difficult to accept because it undermines the illusion of control. A hidden acknowledgement carries with it the sting of inevitability. It tells America's elite that even if they don't say it publicly, they understand that the balance of power is shifting. It is a recognition of destiny, and destiny cannot be negotiated away. This is why the hidden carries more force than the declared. Public praise can be strategic, used to flatter or manipulate. But private recognition cannot be faked. It emerges naturally, often unintentionally, and that is why it cuts so deeply. Washington has learned that lesson once again. Trump's hidden message about India was not dressed up in the language of partnership. It was raw, subtle, and therefore far more credible. The world pays attention to these moments because they reveal the trajectory of the future. If a leader admits something privately, it is a sign that governments are already preparing for it. Trump's acknowledgement of India's growing role was a window into the reality shaping U.S. calculations. And as much as Washington might want to control the narrative, the hidden acknowledgement has already spoken louder than any declaration could. It confirmed what could no longer be denied. India has moved beyond the shadows, and America knows it. Would you like me to move on and expand keynote No. 5 in the same style? America can no longer dictate terms unilaterally in Asia, and that reality marks one of the most dramatic changes in the balance of global power. For decades, Washington carried itself as the sole architect of security and stability in the region. Its military bases stretched across the Pacific, its economic influence reached every corner, and its political presence shaped decisions in capitals from Tokyo to Manila. Asian nations often looked toward Washington as the ultimate arbiter, knowing that American approval or disapproval could determine the outcome of disputes. But the landscape has shifted, and the rise of India is one of the central reasons why America's ability to unilaterally dictate terms has eroded. Asia today is not the Asia of the late 20th century. It is more self-assured, more interconnected, and more resistant to domination by any single power. India has emerged as a powerful voice that cannot be ignored, a nation capable of shaping policies in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and beyond. Washington's traditional model of commanding alliances and expecting compliance is breaking down because countries now have alternatives. They can look to India, they can look to regional coalitions, and they can pursue independent strategies that reduce their dependence on America's dictates. This pluralism in power leaves the U.S. in a position it is unaccustomed to, negotiating rather than commanding. The Indo-Pacific has become the central stage of this transformation. America once envisioned itself as the unquestioned leader of this vast strategic space, countering China's rise and ensuring its own dominance. But without India's cooperation, this vision is incomplete. India occupies a pivotal geographic and political position, and its refusal to serve as a subordinate player forces the United States to treat it as an equal. America can no longer draft the rules of engagement in Asia without considering India's stance, because India's choices carry weight not only for itself, but for the balance of power in the entire region. What makes this change more striking is India's willingness to assert independence even in the face of American pressure. Unlike smaller states that rely heavily on U.S. protection, India has shown that it will pursue its own national interests first, whether that means continuing trade with Russia, building ties with Iran, or strengthening its own defense manufacturing. This independence forces Washington to recognize that its leverage is limited. No matter how much influence the U.S. tries to exert, India will not fall in line. That refusal to conform weakens America's ability to dictate terms unilaterally and demonstrates to other nations that alternatives to American leadership exist. The economic dimension reinforces this reality. Asia is now home to some of the fastest growing markets in the world, and India stands at the center of this economic boom. American corporations and investors see India not as a peripheral market, but as a critical hub of innovation, consumption, and opportunity. Washington's economic strategies in Asia cannot succeed without engaging with India on mutually beneficial terms. Gone are the days when the U.S. could impose trade frameworks and expect compliance. India's size and influence give it the power to shape negotiations, demand favorable terms, and even set examples for others to follow. For America, the loss of unilateral dominance in Asia is not just a strategic adjustment, it is a symbolic wound. The country has long prided itself on being the anchor of global order, the nation that sets the rules and ensures others follow. But in Asia, that model no longer works. The presence of India, alongside the growing assertiveness of other regional players, means Washington must now operate in a multipolar environment. It must listen as much as it speaks, compromise as much as it demands, and share influence rather than monopolize it. This new reality is unsettling for American policymakers, but it is unavoidable. The days of unilateral dictation are over, replaced by a more complex and balanced order in which India holds a central role. The United States may still be powerful, but power without compliance is meaningless. And in Asia, compliance is no longer guaranteed. India's rise has made sure of that, forcing Washington to adjust to a world where it must negotiate with equals rather than command from above. This shift is more than strategic, it is historical. It marks the end of one era and the beginning of another, where America is no longer the unquestioned master of Asia's destiny. Would you like me to continue and expand Keynote Point 6 into 600 words in the same impactful tone? India's unstoppable rise is reshaping destiny, not just diplomacy, and that reality is what makes this moment so significant. Diplomacy can be managed, negotiated, and adjusted with the right strategies, but destiny is something far larger, something that carries the weight of inevitability. When a nation's rise transcends the boundaries of policy and becomes a matter of historical momentum, it is no longer about short-term wins or losses. It is about the rewriting of the global story. India today is not just growing in influence through diplomatic maneuvering. It is reshaping the very direction in which the world is heading. This rise is unstoppable because it is driven by multiple engines of progress that are difficult, if not impossible, to derail. Demographics are one of the strongest of these engines. India's young and dynamic population gives it an unmatched advantage in the global economy. While much of the developed world struggles with aging populations and declining workforces, India stands at the threshold of a demographic dividend that will power its growth for decades to come. This youth-driven momentum is not something that diplomacy or policy from other nations can alter. It is baked into India's destiny. Another driving force is technology and innovation. India has moved far beyond being simply a destination for outsourcing or low-cost labor. It is now a hub of cutting-edge developments in digital infrastructure, artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and space exploration. Its digital economy connects hundreds of millions of people, setting records in financial inclusion and tech adoption that many advanced economies envy. These achievements are not just signs of progress, they are indicators of a country writing a new future. When a nation begins setting trends that others follow, it is no longer merely participating in global affairs, it is defining them. India's rise also extends into the realm of culture and values. As the world's largest democracy, India embodies an alternative model to authoritarian systems. Its resilience in maintaining democratic institutions, despite challenges, inspires nations that seek to balance freedom with progress. India's cultural reach through cinema, music, and philosophy is spreading across continents, giving it a form of soft power that builds influence in ways no treaty or agreement could. This cultural and ideological resonance ensures that India's rise is not confined to material power, but extends into the shaping of global narratives. Economically, India's trajectory is transforming global trade patterns. Its rapidly expanding middle class is becoming a key driver of consumption, attracting businesses and investors from every corner of the world. Supply chains are being redesigned with India as a central hub, reducing overdependence on single sources and creating a more diversified global economy. In this way, India's rise is not simply about its own prosperity, but about restructuring how the world economy functions. That restructuring is irreversible. Another reason why India's ascent feels like destiny rather than diplomacy. Strategically, India is asserting itself as an anchor of stability in a turbulent world. Its role in the Indo-Pacific, its engagement with global institutions, and its ability to maintain independence while partnering with multiple powers all make it indispensable in maintaining balance. Unlike smaller nations that can be pressured into alignment, India navigates its own path, ensuring that its voice is not only heard but respected. This independence ensures that India's rise cannot be co-opted or contained by others. It moves forward on its own terms, shaping the course of international relations as it does so. The idea of destiny comes from the sense that all of these forces, demographic, economic, technological, cultural, and strategic, are converging at once. No single setback or challenge can reverse this trajectory because it is rooted in too many different dimensions of progress. That is why the world views India's rise as unstoppable. And that is why it is more than diplomacy. It is the unfolding of a story that has been long in the making, a story where India takes its place as a central shaper of the global future. This is not just about influence and negotiations. It is about writing the next chapter of history for America, for Asia, and for the world. This recognition is both a challenge and an inevitability because destiny has already begun to unfold, and India stands at its heart.